Hi, I'm Stephanie Valdez. I'm co-owner of Community Bookstore, and we are so thrilled to have a few minutes to talk with you today.
Thank you.
So, although your book is catalogs the substantive and pervasive problems in our election systems, Our Time Is Now is fundamentally a very hopeful book. How do you reconcile these two things, and what keeps you hopeful?
I start the book telling the story of my grandmother and her encounter with the first time that she had the power to be heard in the electoral system, and the combination of fear and promise that was embedded in that moment. I carry that with me, and she articulated it for me, but I was raised to believe that we have both this responsibility to confront the challenges, but we have this opportunity to create more access and more and better futures. And for me, the reconciliation of the two is that you have to know where you are and what you face in order to imagine what you can create and what is possible. I don't see these two things as being in conflict. I see one as being fuel for the other. That by confronting the challenges, by understanding them, I am even better prepared to craft and to carve what is possible. And for me, writing Our Time Is Now and the work that I do is about making sure I have as many friends as possible helping me do this, because this is a lot of work.
Well, we're here to help you do that work however possible. Here in New York City, we're headed into a primary election that will help define the city as it emerges from the ravages of COVID-19. It's also our first major race with ranked choice voting. What do you think of ranked choice voting? What should we, the average citizens of New York City, be doing at the last hour to ensure a fair and representative election?
I think that every advance we make in selection, every opportunity we have to be clearer about our intention and to have the most acute capacity to make choices, the better we are as a nation state. And in my mind, ranked choice voting is one of the antidotes to the Electoral College in sort of the pantheon of terrible to great. I put them on opposite end of the spectrum, Electoral College clearly being terrible. What I want voters to think about is that ranked choice voting is about having a backup plan. If you don't get what you want, what's the next thing that you need? And thinking about those candidates in those terms, that it's not just about who is the most appealing on one lever, on one metric. It's really thinking through, you have a chance to build your best candidate. So which one comes as close as possible to what you want, and then which one comes pretty close but may not be the ideal. That's an extraordinary thing to be able to do without having to come back to another election. And for those of us who live in states where we have runoff elections, ranked choice voting is basically an instant runoff. And by being willing to participate in the system, you also validate for the rest of us the opportunity to have one election and get it done when we're there.
So I'd put you in the pro ranked choice voting category. Cool. What should we be focused on now as citizens in between major federal election cycles to improve election access in 1 or 3 years?
New York State has been making really important progress on voting rights, but let's remember that there are two dynamics at play here. There are states that have had brittle or inflexible voting systems that are trying to make progress or need to start making progress. But you have other systems that are either bad or had broken pieces, and they are actually trying to break them even further. And so the attention that we are focusing through the work I do with Fair Fight Action has really focused on those states that are trying to take what was a functional, if flawed system and make it worse. We have to push back against that, because there is no justification in this last election in particular for making it harder to access the right to vote. And terms of art do not make things so. So because you use a phrase that conjures up fear, it does not mean that fear is real or valid. But at the exact same time, we have to still make progress on voting. We should all be working towards the ideal of a voting system that allows every citizen who's eligible to have full and unfettered access. And that's why federal legislation is so important, Because as we wait for states to take up their responsibility and to take up the cause, if we had a federal law that created a standardized version for just the quality of democracy, no matter where you live, we improve the likelihood that no matter who we are, our sense of participation and thus our sense of citizenship is reinforced as opposed to eroded by broken systems and by those who seek to undermine our voices.
And what can we do to best support your work right now, Stacey?
Well, I appreciate the support by reading Our Time Is Now, in part because it's hard to fix something if you don't understand not only how it's broken, but why it's broken. And I always use this architecture. What's the problem? Why is it a problem? And then how do you solve it? And Our Time Is Now is designed to make sure we all can talk about the problem with the same language, but that we also have a common understanding of why it's a problem. Because even if it doesn't affect you directly, there are so many communities for whom this is the difference between participation and non-participation, but it's also the difference between life and death. We think about the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 on communities that are also traditionally the targets of voter suppression. There is no clearer an example of why we have to fix this now. But we also need you to do the activist work of visiting stopjimcrow2.com. No matter where you live, especially if you're in New York, we need your voices. We need to lift up, no matter where we are in America, the cri de coeur that democracy belongs to all of us. And so no matter where we live, we should be defending the right to democracy for everyone. And if you go to stopjimcrow2.com, we'll give you all the rules and all the opportunities you need to be a part of making sure that this year we finally start to tackle for the 21st century the challenges to our democracy.
Great. And we will also be reading our copies of Our Time Is Now so that we know the history and sort of understand the background of what can be changed.
Thank you, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.